Trump just successfully erased America's greatest black soldiers to honor white supremacists. On December 8th, there was a chance to save them, but the Republican Congress and Mike Johnson pathetically caved to Trump's veto threat, allowing him to strip all recognition from Medal of Honor recipients permanently. Let's start with what just happened. December 8th, 2025. The fiscal 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, the annual must-pass bill that funds the entire military, was being finalized. Both chambers had included provisions to restore the base names that Trump had changed. Representative Marilyn Strickland's House amendment required all bases to revert to the names chosen by the Bipartisan Naming Commission. Senator Tim Kaine's Senate provision targeted the 3 Virginia bases specifically. Both passed their committees. Both made it into the compromise bill that armed services leaders from both parties agreed upon. Then the White House made its move. Trump's team told lawmakers he would veto the entire NDAA if those provisions remained. Not over troop pay, not over weapons systems, over base names, just like he did in 2020. Speaker Johnson had a choice: stand up to Trump and fight for the heroes whose names had been stripped, or cave and remove the provisions to avoid a veto fight. Johnson caved. On Sunday, December 8th, he removed both the naming provisions and other bipartisan priorities from the final bill. Representative Strickland released a statement. The president's threat to veto the bill over this amendment, as he has done before, only proves that the president and this administration aim to politicize and demoralize every service member who chooses to put their life on the line while serving their country. Speaker Johnson and the president killed my bipartisan amendment that passed in committee at the last minute. They are choosing to honor Confederate traitors who fought to uphold the institution of slavery and lost a war, rather than supporting our service members, 40% of whom are people of color. The erasure stands. No congressional remedy. The names are permanent. Now let me take you back to June 10th, 2025, to show you how we got here. Trump stood at Fort Bragg celebrating the Army's 250th birthday. We are also going to be restoring the names to Fort Pickett, Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Rucker, Fort Polk, Fort A.P. Hill, and Fort Robert E. Lee, he said. We won a lot of battles out of those forts. It's no time to change, and I'm superstitious. Within 24 hours, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth began the process. By July 2025, all 9 bases had been renamed. But here's the critical detail. Federal law explicitly prohibits naming any Defense Department asset after anyone who served or held leadership within the Confederacy. That law is still on the books. Trump couldn't legally rename Fort Bragg after Confederate General Braxton Bragg. So how did he do it? The loophole. Find someone else with the same last name. Fort Bragg, named for Private First Class Roland L. Bragg, an 82nd Airborne soldier from World War II. Fort Hood, Colonel Robert B. Hood, a World War I officer. Fort Polk, General James H. Polk, a World War II commander. All honorable soldiers, all obscure enough that 99% of Americans had never heard of them. All white, all selected for one reason: they shared surnames with Confederate generals. It's malicious compliance, following the letter of the law while violating its spirit so thoroughly that the loophole becomes a monument to bad faith. Retired Brigadier General Ty Seidel, who served as vice chair of the Naming Commission and spent 37 years in the Army, was blunt. This is a legal fiction. They're restoring Confederate names by finding people with the same surnames. Everyone knows what they're doing. The intent is to honor the Confederacy by proxy. Lawrence Romo, another commission member, called the actions immoral, unjustified, unprofessional, and unbecoming. Even relatives of the original Confederates objected. After one renaming, a descendant of Confederate Colonel Edmund Rucker said, "Rucker is not that important. My family committed treason. We should not be looking to the past." As a Rucker, I am just appalled. So let me tell you what was lost. Because these weren't just names on signs. These were symbols that told every soldier of color, you belong here. Fort Hood, Texas, the largest active-duty armored installation in the United States. In 2023, It became Fort Cavazos after General Richard E. Cavazos, the first Hispanic four-star general in Army history. Born in 1929 to Mexican-American ranch workers in South Texas during an era of intense racism. Korea, 1953. First Lieutenant Cavazos commanded Puerto Rican soldiers in the 65th Infantry, the Borinqueniers. On June 14th, he led a nighttime raid on enemy positions. When devastating artillery hit, he withdrew and regrouped, then attacked again, 3 times total through enemy fire. When ordered to withdraw, Cavazos stayed behind alone, searching for missing men. He found 5 wounded soldiers and evacuated them one by one under fire, then went back. 4 more trips into enemy territory, searching for casualties. Only when every man was accounted for did he allow treatment of his own wounds. For this, he received the Distinguished Service Cross. In Vietnam, 1967, as a lieutenant colonel, he earned a 2nd Distinguished Service Cross, moving among troops under fire, directing counterattacks, refusing to leave until every enemy position was destroyed. Cavazos rose to 4-star general, commanding 3rd Corps and Forces Command. He retired after 33 years. On January 3, 2025, just 5 months before Trump's announcement, President Biden posthumously awarded Cavazos the Medal of Honor. On May 9, 2023, Fort Hood officially became Fort Cavazos. His family attended. Children, grandchildren, relatives who remembered the ranch foreman's son who became a giant of American military history. For 2 years, soldiers trained there knowing they walked in the footsteps of greatness. Then, June 10, 2025, Trump took it away, replaced with Colonel Robert B. Hood, a Distinguished Service Cross recipient from World War I. Someone 99% of Americans had never heard of before 2025. The family released a devastated statement. General Cavazos dedicated his life to serving this country and breaking barriers for Latino service members. To have his name removed less than 2 years after the redesignation and mere months after he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor is a profound disrespect not just to our family, but to every Hispanic American who has served in uniform. Fort Gregg-Adams, Virginia, named in 2023 for Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Gregg, the first black general officer to command a U.S. installation. Adams, commander of the 68th Central Postal Directory Battalion, the only all-black women's Army Corps unit deployed overseas during World War II. The 6888 cleared a years-long male backlog in the European theater. Adams faced segregation, sexual harassment, orders to work under white officers. She refused, telling a British commander, "Over my dead body, sir." The 688th performed brilliantly. In April 2025, just 6 weeks before Trump's announcement, Speaker Mike Johnson personally awarded the unit the Congressional Gold Medal, praising Adams' incomparable leadership. 6 weeks later, Trump stripped her name from the base, replaced with Private Fitz Lee, a Spanish-American war hero. Adams' son learned from a televised speech. No phone call, no courtesy visit, just a news alert that his mother's name had been erased. Fort Johnson, Louisiana, named in 2023 for Sergeant Henry Johnson, the Harlem Hellfighter. May 15, 1918, Argonne Forest. Johnson and Private Needham Roberts on night patrol when German raiders attacked. Roberts was badly wounded. Johnson, 5'4" and 130 pounds, fought alone. Threw grenades until they ran out. Fired his rifle's 3 shots. When Germans tried to capture Roberts, Johnson charged with his bolo knife. Stabbed 1 soldier in the stomach, another in the ribs. Hand-to-hand combat against 20 men. He suffered 21 wounds but saved his friend. France immediately awarded him the Croix de Guerre, their highest honor. America denied him recognition. His discharge papers didn't mention his injuries, no. Disability benefits. He died in poverty in 1929. It took 97 years, until 2015, for President Obama to award him the Medal of Honor. In 2023, Fort Polk became Fort Johnson. Finally, recognition. For 2 years, his story inspired every soldier who trained there. Then Trump took it away, replacing him with General James H. Polk, a World War II officer chosen because he shared a Confederate surname. Senator Chuck Schumer called it a vile insult to the memory and heroic patriotism of Sergeant Henry Johnson, a Medal of Honor recipient who Theodore Roosevelt called one of the 5 bravest Americans to have served in World War I. 8 other bases saw similar erasures. Fort Eisenhower reverted to Fort Gordon. Fort Walker, honoring Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, the only woman ever awarded the Medal of Honor, became Fort Anderson Pin Hill. Fort Barfoot, named for a Native American Medal of Honor recipient, became Fort Pickett. Fort Novosel, honoring a helicopter pilot who evacuated 5,500 wounded from Vietnam, became Fort Rucker. Fort Liberty became Fort Bragg. Fort Moore, honoring the legendary commander from We Were Soldiers, became Fort Benning. Each replacement, an obscure soldier with a matching surname. Each message, clear. The pattern extended beyond names. In March 2025, the Pentagon launched a DEI purge. Web pages honoring Jackie Robinson's military service, removed. The Tuskegee Airmen, taken down. Navajo Code talkers, gone. Medal of Honor recipient Major General Charles C. Rogers, deleted. Colin Powell's biography noting he was the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs, scrubbed. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell defended it. Anybody that says in the Department of Defense that diversity is our strength is, frankly, incorrect. After outcry, some pages were restored. They blamed AI and search terms. But the Fort Johnson web page describing Henry Johnson's heroism, removed during the DEI purge, briefly returned, then permanently erased when the name itself was stripped. Arlington National Cemetery saw similar purges. Pages noting soldiers were the first black or Hispanic recipients of honors, removed. Biographies mentioning Colin Powell was the first black chairman, edited. The rationale, highlighting race is inherently divisive, but erasing it erases the discrimination people faced, the barriers they overcame, the significance of their achievements. Henry Johnson's heroism wasn't just fighting Germans. It was fighting while his country denied him recognition for being black, then dying forgotten. That context matters. Charity Adams' leadership wasn't just moving mail. It was proving black women could command, excel, refuse subordination. That context matters. Trump claimed this was about tradition and unit cohesion. At Fort Bragg, he said soldiers identify with base names, that changing them disrupts morale. Defense Secretary Hegseth echoed this at his confirmation hearing. The problem? Nobody asked the soldiers, the naming. Commission did. They visited every base, held public forums, solicited input from service members and communities. They found support for change. Soldiers identified with their units and missions, not the name on the gate. The Commission's report. Soldiers and veterans overwhelmingly emphasized that their pride and identity derive from their unit, their comrades, and their service, not from the name of the installation. Black service members especially found Confederate names offensive. One black sergeant at Fort Hood told the Commission, "Every time I drive through that gate, I'm reminded that this place was named for someone who fought to keep my ancestors enslaved. That's not tradition. That's humiliation." Here's the hypocrisy. Trump vetoed the 2020 NDAA claiming changing names would disrupt morale and disrespect tradition. Then in 2025, he changed the names again. If changing names disrupts unit cohesion, it disrupts it whether you're honoring black heroes or echoing Confederates. If tradition matters, then the 2 years Fort Cavazos existed should matter. If respecting history is important, then Cavazos' Medal of Honor, awarded months before Trump stripped his name, should matter. But none of that mattered, because unit cohesion was never the point. The point was erasing recognition of black service. The financial cost reveals the bad faith. The original renaming, mandated by Congress, completed in 2023, cost $40 million across 9 bases. Everything: signs, letterhead, maps, systems, patches. A one-time investment to move forward. Trump's reversions will cost nearly as much. Fort Polk alone spent $1.3 million to become Fort Johnson. The reversion cost $300,000. Multiply across 9 installations. Add administrative burden, database updates, reprinted materials. Total, approaching $30 million. To bring back names that echo the Confederacy. To erase recognition of Black, Hispanic, Native American, and women soldiers. To send a message, but the real cost is human. LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, issued a strong condemnation. National President Roman Palomares, this reversal erases our place in history and is an insult to every Latino who has worn the uniform with honor. Reversing the decision to name a base after General Cavazos sends a dangerous message that our contributions can be discarded when politically inconvenient. We will not stand by quietly. From Killeen, Texas, LULAC District Director Ana Luisa Tapia. This redesignation is a thinly veiled attempt to mask the prejudice that still infects our systems. It is not about honoring Colonel Hood. This is about dishonoring General Cavazos and the millions of Latinos who have served this nation. Now we're back to December 8, 2025. Congress had the chance to fix it. The House Armed Services Committee had passed Strickland's Amendment 3027, with 3 Republicans crossing over. The Senate included Kane's provision. Both made the final compromise. Bipartisan support, then Trump's veto threat, and Johnson's capitulation. Representative Adam Smith, ranking member of House Armed Services, released a statement about how a number of issues were handled by the Speaker and the White House during final negotiations, disregarding input from committees of jurisdiction and forcing in provisions without four-corner agreement. Johnson directed the exclusion of several issues that have bipartisan and bicameral support, including the base names. So here we are. 9 bases carrying names that echo the Confederacy. $40 million spent to move forward, $30 million to move back. Heroes erased, families devastated, and as of 2 days ago, no congressional remedy. Trump used a loophole. Johnson caved. The erasure is permanent. Unless the next Congress acts, unless public pressure forces change, unless families sue. But let's be clear about what this is. This isn't about respecting military tradition. Preserving history means acknowledging all of it. Teaching that bases were named after Confederates during Jim Crow to intimidate black soldiers. Understanding that Henry Johnson died forgotten because racism was institutional. Recognizing that Charity Adams had to fight her own military. Erasing the names of those who overcame that history isn't preserving it. It's repeating it. It's saying, your service mattered, but not enough. It's saying, we'll recognize you when convenient. Strip that recognition when it's not. It's saying, tradition means what we want it to mean. And right now, it means echoing the Confederacy. Symbols matter. When a young black kid in Texas considers joining the army and sees Fort Cavazos, he thinks, they value people like me. When a young Latina learns about Charity Adams, she thinks, I can lead. When anyone learns the military honors those who broke barriers despite discrimination, it tells them they belong. That's what the Naming Commission achieved. That's what Trump erased. And he did it publicly at Fort Bragg, with a smirk, calling it a gift to my friends. The subtext, these are my people. They understand. The people who don't appreciate it? Soldiers of color, families of honored dead, civil rights organizations, historians. Anyone who understands moving forward means reckoning with the past, not resurrecting it. In 1919, Henry Johnson led the victory parade through New York City. Thousands celebrated him. Within months, it faded. The military denied disability benefits. He died a decade later, forgotten. In 2023, Fort Polk became Fort Johnson. His memory honored. In 2025, stripped away. The pattern repeats. Celebrate black heroes when convenient. Erase them when it's not. Call it tradition. Call it anything but what it is. This is why I make these videos. To document injustices, preserve stories, ensure that when institutions erase history, there's a record. Henry Johnson's story won't disappear because Trump took his name off a base. Richard Cavazos' heroism doesn't diminish. Charity Adams's leadership isn't erased. Their stories endure because people fight to tell them, because families preserve memory, because we refuse to let heroes be forgotten. That's the work, and it's never finished, because every step forward invites 2 steps back. Every recognition granted can be stripped away, unless we fight for it, unless we document it, unless we refuse to let erasure stand. Henry Johnson fought off 20 Germans with a knife, saved his friend, earned the Medal of Honor. For 110 years, America has struggled to decide if that matters enough. First denied recognition, then 97 years later gave him the medal, named a fort after him. 2 years later, took it away. That's not tradition. That's institutional amnesia. That's a country that can't decide whether black heroism counts. 2 days ago, Congress had the chance to restore these heroes. Trump threatened. Johnson caved. The erasure stands. 9 bases, 9 heroes erased, and a message sent to every soldier of color. Your service matters, but your recognition doesn't. Not permanently. Not when tradition, their tradition, not yours, reasserts itself. That's the story. That's what happened in 2025. And that's what we can't let stand.